Hi.
Okay, so I'd like to discuss this topic, engineering nature, in the context of one of my projects. It's a theoretical architecture project, sort of a architecture research project that examines the notion of the public park in the modern city and how it can maximize biodiversity in a complex socio-ecological system such as Manhattan. By way of introduction, I want to make the analogy between architecture and alchemy. Contrary to popular belief, the alchemists were not just trying to turn lead into gold, but this was just one step towards understanding the fundamental nature of the universe. So, in contemporary architecture and design practice, not only are we now able to manipulate atomic substance, nanotechnology, genetic modification, virtual reality, but in philosophical terms, applying alchemical practices to architecture has the potential to yield buildings that exist as the intended result between the complex relationships of systems, both natural and artificial. So rather than adding or subtracting from the environment, really working with the environment. So with architecture, I'm looking towards a more holistic view, not necessarily an eco-friendly or sustainable architecture, but one that seeks coherence with the environment, that is carefully crafted through technological, manual, and environmental constraints, and remains dynamic, adapting, constantly in dialogue with its environment and its users. So in this diagram, I am treating Central Park as a living organism, a complex network of systems exchanging information with the city, with each other, through this circulatory system of roads and pathways. I then began to dissect the park to see how these individual systems were operating, how information was flowing throughout it, avoiding certain obstacles, crossing paths, intersecting. And then I tried to look for specific instances where a slight change in transmitted information could potentially trigger massive effects, mutating the entire park. Advances in the interpretation of the second law of thermodynamics have demonstrated that in open systems, such as social and biological systems, where energy and matter are being exchanged with the environment, that these systems have the capacity to self-organize and reach higher levels of order and complexity when they're pushed far from equilibrium. So here I isolated an instance where the longitudinal roadways puncture the surface of the earth and dive under or jump over. And then I used this to change the relationship of the park to the city and allow the park to multiply and expand. So here's a diagram of the final augmentation where the park has now extended out into the city grid. This is an image where we see that the park is carving out buildings, disturbing the boundary between the park and the city, and literally intertwining the natural with the man-made. This is a detail of sections considering how these spaces could possibly be negotiated. An image of another one of these moments. And one more. So whether this is actually a speculative proposal for a giant park that extends out into the city, or it's more of a hypothetical algorithmic zoning tool for designating green areas, I believe that it's just as important to explore imaginary architecture as it is to learning the trade of building, as the biological imperative of living things becomes more and more intertwined with the digital revolution. Society now finds itself at one of the most transforming periods in history. The decline of the Industrial Revolution is forcing us to confront the limitations of the machine model of reality, which has always stressed uniformity, homogeneity, repetition. and science is beginning to shift its attention to those aspects of reality that characterize today's accelerated social change. Natural systems are beginning to replace the machine as a general model for design. I think that architects and designers today are in a unique position to inform and shape the future of society because they form a nexus between revolutions and everyday life. They're able to grasp these momentous changes in science and technology and convert them into objects and ideas that people can understand. I'm very optimistic about the potential of new techniques and new technologies and exploring the boundaries of the profession and especially fostering interchange with other disciplines. Thank you.